My name is Sharice King, and I am an associate professor in the Department of Linguistics, and I teach in language and the human in the winter.
My name is Jason Riggle. I'm also an associate professor in the Department of Linguistics, and I teach in language and the human in the fall.
Yes.
So,
So,
what's your quarter about?
so yeah, our quarter is about exploring the role of how identities develop, and coming off of your quarter, which focuses more on the social political kind of institutions and of power. We focus on the individual and how they navigate those institutions in order to think about their identity with respect to race, class, sexuality, gender, amongst other kinds of social categories. And we get to do this with a range of kinds of text and mediums, and it's fun.
Wow, that was a really good answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I really hope that I set your students up well for receiving them after my class. Yeah, so the fall quarter is about language and power, and so we get students directly out of high school. This is their first quarter at the University of Chicago, which is a great time to like lean into the Socratic method and arguing with each other and even maybe arguing with the authors of some of the texts, which I hope serves you well. And
Yes.
yeah, like your quarter, we do everything from plays to movies to novels to poetry and everything. And yeah, the whole point of the autumn quarter is to sort of deconstruct our already internalized and unquestioned ideas about what it means to be an authority on language, what it means to have like correct language or correct
Mm.
grammar, and how that serves to construct, social structures that are sometimes good, sometimes bad, more often bad than good. But a lot of that is questioned in all of the works that we discuss. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just to piggyback off of that, one of the cool things that students get exposed to that I think is just a part of the broader General U Chicago method is that we're not trying to get you to get the right answer, right? We're trying to get you to sort of sit with the possibilities, to think about sort of the different approaches you can take to a particular problem, to challenge your own assumptions, as well as your classmates, right? And to be engaged with each other about different kinds of ideas using evidence from the text or even beyond the classroom, because some students feel inspired. It's, for example, in my class, they bring in work from the fall in order to build their arguments within their paper or within classroom discussions. And so I think that that is also pretty core to the core.
I could not agree more. And I think one of the things we try to do in the core is establish habits of the mind, which sounds like a weird technical term, but you know, exactly what you said, we're trying to teach people to engage with the text, but also engage with their peers. And even if they disagree with them, to learn to like build in perspectives and arguments from other people who are also reading the material for the first time and incorporate those when they agree with them and even when they disagree. How to completely hate the point that the primary text is making, but to learn to not just express an opinion and say I
Mhm.
hate it because it's bad, but to like cite other sources from other texts and other things to say this is the wrong way to look at it. And I really hope that by the time you get to the core at the University of Chicago, you're ready to not just consume information from other people and learn to regurgitate it very correctly, but instead to challenge it and to create your own new knowledge. That doesn't mean you have to come up with some idea nobody's ever had before, but you have to, even when you disagree, especially when you disagree, you have to base it on evidence rather than just
Yes.
opinion. And we live in a world where people love to make lots of arguments based on opinion and feeling, and that is all valid, but that doesn't make a great argument. Yeah,
Hmm.
and so
And I love that you put it in conversation with the broader society, because we're not just teaching these skills for, again, you to get an A in this class, but for you to be able to take them out into the broader world and have hard conversations with people, drawing on the knowledges that you created from being in different kinds of courses, but also that you've created from engaging in real world problems in which you have to apply the same kinds of learning concepts in order to come up with, coherent analyses about why the world is the way it is at the moment, right? So, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I do to my students, because I have the luxury of getting them their first week at the University of Chicago,
Hmm.
is I ask them why they're here, and I see who's going to repeat the language from the course book or whatever, and I just say, like, why are you taking this class? What do you expect to get out of it? And I get a lot of really interesting and different answers from them. And the thing that, I try to say to them and, try to like draw out of them is that they're here to be able to come up with and articulate interesting ideas. They don't have to be right. And it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of important that they are not too worried about being right, because the obviously right ideas are already things that you've heard 1,000 times before, or that's already been, supported by somebody else. So you have to come up with an interesting and new idea, new in the context of the conversation we're having, and support it.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell my students often when they show up, this is week one and they're afraid, I tell them that you can write an essay with like a really great idea that you support really well and it's interesting and new, and you'll get an A. And I say, but if you just tell me things that other people have already thought before and you write it really well and you support it well, that's a B. And the students are afraid, very deeply afraid, because at this point that feels like an F to them. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
the right
feel
kind of
like
threat.
you're
Yeah.
opening up sort of the conversation to think about pedagogy and sort of
Mm-hmm.
what's important to us that students walk away with or be able to cultivate within the classroom. And so, like, those are going to be things like when we say use, evidence backed kind of information to support your point, being able to do close readings,
Oh
being
yeah.
able to do cross textual analyses. So maybe relating kinds of ideas that haven't previously been thought of as connected, whether it's from this movie or from this poem. Or, for example, I think the one that we've talked about recently was the poem Parsley, which is about the massacre in DR, right, under Trujillo, and then how that comes to be the topic of conversation in uh, the Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, right? And so how these two separate texts and even two separate styles of text, one is a poem and one is a novel, come to talk about the same topic and the kind of effect that it's had on different generations of people, right? I think that's something that we want our students to be able to recognize and pull the threads together.
Absolutely, yeah. And one of the films we've taught, so we do films in the course as well.
Mm-hmm.
One of the films I liked doing is "Sorry to Bother You" by Boots Riley, which
Love.
is a really wildly excellent
So good.
pairing with Pygmalion by Bernard Shaw, which is all about like constructing prestige dialects and the value to be gained from that. But then "Sorry to Bother You" is a much more modern take on it, and you
Yeah.
see both the critique from within your community about doing a prestige dialect, which takes you out of community but gets you status, and the position that puts someone in trying to succeed in the world while still being true to themselves and their community. And that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, one of the cool things is again, going back to being able to work with different kind of texts, is
Mm-hmm.
my students always at the end of the quarter when I ask them questions about sort of what were your favorite texts that you engaged with, they come back to one of the hardest pieces of literature, which is a chapter, a cultural anthropology chapter from called Passions of the Tongue by
Oh yeah, yeah.
Ramaswamy. And, this is a very difficult piece of writing for someone who has never, again, these are our freshmen coming in with maybe 1/4 of anthropology under their belts,
Mm-hmm.
if that, right? And linguistics under their belts, if that. And they're having to weigh in on ideas about language as they're tied to social political projects.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
they always, even though it's so hard, they struggle with it. We come to class, they're always like, Professor, this one was hard. Like, this one was so difficult. I didn't understand the jargon. And yet, when we walk through and do that close reading together, by the end, they're like, I actually end up loving that paper because they realize, again, it's not about getting to the rightness of what the argument was. Eventually, you'll get there, but it was about the struggling over the text and the close readings to sort of unpack how each idea was building on the next. And so, yeah, I love to see students sort of transform their belief about the kind of work that they can do and the
Mm-hmm.
difficulty of it that they are more than capable of eclipsing.
Often I ask my students, like, if you're going to remember something in 10 years, and I'm old enough to know that I have no ability to predict what I'm going to remember in 10 years. I'm like, what are you going to remember 10 years from now about this class? And I've asked them that. And that's one of the things that they say the most, which is trust yourself a little bit less when you're judging other people's language. And I'm like, it's not.
Yes.
I don't know that everybody says that, but some people say that, which I think is pretty useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I hope that, language in the human gets more linguistic converts or just people interested in language more broadly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, we're all experts. We all are perfect speakers of one or more languages or
Absolutely.
one or more dialects. We all shift between them according to invisible social rules, which we've also
Mhm.
learned perfectly.
Yeah.
But despite being experts, we're also deeply ignorant about why we do what we do a lot of the time. And if we could do anything right in this class, it'd be to
Yeah.
get people to realize some of those things. Yeah.
Absolutely. We don't always know what we don't know. And so to be able to uncover that structure, both in terms of like the way that we have ideas about rules of language, right? The linguistic side, and then sort of our ideas about use of those rules, application of those rules. That's the social side to me, right?
Yeah.
That's what
That's
we
super
want
interesting
them
too. Yeah.
to think about and walk away with as
Yeah.
essential to their practice in the future.
Absolutely. I think that's the best. That's the best description of the course. I don't know what's in
Yeah.
the course catalog, but I want that one. Yeah.
Okay.